Testing, testing. Commissioner Shashman, can you hear us? Yes, thanks. Yep, thanks, Dave.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for October 2nd, 2024. We actually have two folks that are joining the Public Service Commission that I want to introduce. One is a new employee, and one is someone who's coming back to us. Cameron Walton has joined the Public Service Commission as a regulatory economist. Cameron is a graduate of the University of Maryland College Park, and he's going to be working with the economic team. So, welcome aboard, Cameron. And Monique Savoy is returning to the Public Service Commission as a solar renewable energy specialist on the technical staff. She worked for the Public Service Commission before, left us in November of 2021 to go work for the city of Baltimore, but she's recently come back to us, so we want to welcome her back to the team. So. And with that, our first item is to approve the minutes of our administrative meeting of September 25th, 2024. Commissioner Sushman.
Aye.
Commissioner Barbe.
Aye.
Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. There's one item on today's consent agenda. It's a notification from Sprint Spectrum LLC of withdrawal from the Maryland Universal Service Fund.
Okay, with that, I move that we note the filing. Commissioner Sushman.
Aye.
Commissioner Barbe.
Aye.
Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye.
And the one item on today's administrative agenda, item number 2, is a joint application from the Maryland American Water Company and Severn Water Company for approval of an asset purchase agreement and franchise transfer.
Good morning, Chair Hoover, Commissioners. James Greiger on behalf of staff. This item concerns an application by Maryland American Water Company, or MAW, seeking Commission approval of an asset purchase agreement transferring Severn Water Company's water treatment and distribution system to MAW. Additionally, the applicant is requesting Commission approval of a transfer of Severn Water Company's franchise to provide water distribution services in the service territory served by Severn's water distribution system. Public Utilities Articles Section 6101 and 5203 require prior Commission approval for a transfer of ownership interest in a public service company. Public Utilities Article Section 5201 requires Commission authorization to exercise a water system franchise. Sections 6301 and 6304 of the article detail the process for an acquiring water company and a selling water company to determine fair market value of the water system in the context of a sale. Section 6307 details the application and approval process for a water system transfer between two utilities. MAW and Severn entered into the asset purchase agreement on November 28, 2023. The agreement provides a framework for MAW to acquire all rights, title, and interest in Severn's water distribution system. MAW and Severn agreed to use the fair market value determination methodology outlined in the PUA. Ultimately, the fair market value of the Severn water system within the meaning of the Public Utilities Article, Section 6301, was determined to be $1,605,000. The purchase price, as described in the asset purchase agreement, is $1,578,750. This number was set in the agreement as $1.5 million, plus 75% of the amount the fair market value exceeds that $1.5 million. Furthermore, the transaction and closing costs associated with this agreement amounted to $53,884. Public Utilities Article Section 6307C states that if the Commission issues an order approving an application, the rate-making rate base of the selling utility must be included in the order. Pursuant to the article, the rate-making rate base is the lesser of the purchase price negotiated by the utilities or the fair market value of the selling utility, either of which inclusive of reasonable transaction costs. In this instant transaction, the rate-making rate base of Severn is $1,632,634, the negotiated purchase price plus the transaction and closing costs. The application included revised tariff pages containing a schedule of rates, service charges, and fees. The water service rates, miscellaneous charges, and terms and conditions are identical to Severn's existing tariffed rates. There will be no direct bill impacts to customers as a result of this transaction. MAW indicates in the application that this transaction is in the public interest as a wholly owned subsidiary of American Water, the largest investor-owned water service company in the United States. MAW has the resources and expertise to maintain this water system and provide safe and reliable service to the approximate 1,702 customers served by the Severn system. Staff agrees that this transfer of ownership is in the public interest. Once this agreement is consummated, Severn customers will have access to improved resources and will benefit from the increased economies of scale associated with MAW providing water services. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission approve the asset purchase agreement and franchise transfer of Severn's water treatment and distribution system to MAW. Additionally, the Commission should determine the rate-making rate base of Severn to be $1,632,634. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Any questions for staff? Okay.
Thank you, Chair Hoover, Commissioners. David Bugelmans on behalf of Maryland American Water Company. I'm also joined this morning by Mr. J.W. Walker, the Project Manager of Operations and Business Development for Maryland American Water. I think staff did a good job with his buck sheet and his presentation this morning, so we have nothing to add, but we're here to answer any questions you may have about this request.
Okay. Any questions for the company? Actually, one from me. Has American Water contacted the customers of Severn, or is that going to happen? Or
That is going to happen, Your Honor. The way the purchase agreement is structured is if the Commission approves this transaction, close would be within 60 days. And my understanding is that as part of that transition, notice would be provided to customers.
Okay. And I guess for staff, I mean, hypothetically, if someone has a problem with this, do they just let us know, or I mean, how does that work?
A problem with the transaction itself,
Right.
or
yeah.
any?
So if one of the existing customers of Severn, for whatever reason, doesn't want to become a customer of American Water,
I suppose an appropriate vehicle to lodge that complaint would be the complaint system that already exists with the Public Service Commission. So a filing with the Commission or through the complaint process.
okay. Alrighty. Okay, with that, I move we approve the asset purchase agreement and franchise transfer of Severn Water Company's water treatment and distribution system to the Maryland American Water Company, and we determine the rate base of Severn Water Company to be $1,632,634. Commissioner Suchman. Commissioner Barbe.
Aye.
Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. And with that, we're adjourned. Now, we get a couple other proceedings going on today. First one is going to deal with the Office of Home Heating Programs. So why don't we take like a 5-minute break to...
I think we're going to go to POR next.
Oh, we're doing the PR? Okay, so strike that. We're actually moving on to PC 65. POR, but again, let's take like a 5-minute break and then we'll get people situated. So. Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Public Service Commission's PC 65 proceeding. So let me take appearances of the folks that want to participate in this.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel.
Brian Green for the Retail Energy Supply Association, NRG Energy, and Clean Choice Energy.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. David Hoppick will be doing most of the talking for staff. He's available on the web access. And with me in the room also are Drew McAuliffe and Ruthie Herman, either of whom might have at some point something to add.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matthew Seegers appearing for Pepco and Delmarva Power. Also with me is Ms. Bev Sikora on behalf of Baltimore Gas and Electric.
Good morning, Jessica Reba on behalf of the Potomac Edison Company.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. If this is the OHEP hearing, I'm making my appearance on behalf of that for BGE, Brent Balea.
Good morning, Chair Hoover and members of the Commission. Damon Krieger on behalf of Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative. Thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Hoppick, you want to go right ahead?
Mr. Chair, did you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead. Here.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. David Hoppick on behalf of staff.
Actually, why don't you either get a little closer or speak a little louder? So.
Okay. I can also use headphones if needed.
Well, let's try it this way, then we'll see.
Chair
So.
and Commissioners, David Hoppick on behalf of staff. Staff's PC 65 report filed on September 13, 2024 makes numerous conclusions and recommendations regarding implementing the Senate Bill 1 POR requirements. Additionally, staff has reviewed comments submitted by other parties on Monday. As staff explains in its report, utilities cannot implement a utility consolidated billing or UCB mechanism without POR by January 1, 2025, and dual billing is the only
Wait a minute.
utilities can implement by January 1, 2025. If dual billing is the sole residential retail supply billing option, it is likely that a significant portion of current retail supply customers will be dropped to default utility, electric, and gas service. Based on the information provided by utilities, staff has recommended a June 1, 2026 date certain by which utilities must make a transition to a non-POR UCB residential billing system. To facilitate compliance with the January 1, 2025 deadline for new and renewed residential retail supply contracts, to avoid large-scale drops, and to avoid forcing existing residential retail supply customers that are not dropped into dual billing, staff recommends an interim compliance plan that allows existing pre-January 1, 2025 residential retail supply contracts to be continued to be billed by POR UCB until the contracts expire, are renewed, or another UCB mechanism is in place, and require all new and renewed residential contracts on and after January 1, 2025 to use dual billing until another UCB mechanism is in place. Staff additionally recommends that the Commission issue its decision regarding staff's interim compliance plan quickly. As stated in staff's report, staff recommends that the Commission adopt pro rata
partial payment allocation for post-POR UCB. Regarding the criticisms of pro rata and customer disconnection, staff notes that default commodity service customers, for example, an SOS customer, must pay commodity arrearages to avoid disconnection, and that going forward, residential retail supply prices will be capped based on trailing 12-month average default service prices. Thus, the disconnection risk of a post-SB1 pro rata utility consolidated billing will be similar to what SOS customers and default gas customers face today. Regarding staff's recommendation that utilities apply COMAR 20.30.03.01A late fees to UCB supplier charges and remit the revenue to suppliers, staff notes that this is consistent with SOS and default gas service late fees, and that the Commission can require that suppliers using UCB with late fees applied through UCB may not separately charge for late fees. Staff made specific COMAR waiver recommendations to implement dual billing and for payment posting and pro rata allocation, depending on the post-POR UCB partial payment mechanism selected by the Commission. Staff is available for questions.
Okay, Commissioner Sussman.
Okay, so this is awkward because I have to try to. Actually, Dave, I can hear you fine. So
Okay.
hopefully, you and I will have this conversation, and other people will be able to hear us. Okay, so recognizing that I am not a computer person, but I've been trying to understand how the mechanism works. So just clarify for me, under UCB now, when a bill goes out by the utility, the supplier is automatically paid less the discount. Is that how it works?
That is correct. So regardless of the amount the customer pays, what the utility pays the customer for that POR UCB retail supply customer is the amount billed less the POR discount rate. So yes, short answer is you're correct.
Okay, so there's really nothing that can be done to stop that from happening. Which is the conundrum we're in now, which is that their system is set up so that POR always is always part of UCB. So you can't separate out the two.
So the utilities all use POR UCB in order to implement, for example, pro rata or payment posting. They have all told us, first of all, they need the Commission to decide how each of those would work. And then they need sufficient time to program, test, before they can roll it out. So if UCB went away, if POR UCB went away January 1, 2025, the only thing that's left and that they can implement and exists now is dual billing.
Right, so they couldn't do pro rata unless they actually sort of went into the system and made a modification, even if they didn't change the whole billing system. They'd have to do something in addition to what's being done now.
Yeah, and that's also true for a payment posting system. They would also have to do some programming changes.
Right,
as well.
and then but in terms of dual billing, we've been told that the retail suppliers don't have the programs in place to affect dual billing starting on January 1st. Is that your understanding?
Yes, at a high level, please note that there are some residential retail supply customers dual billed now. And it is likely that some portion, likely a small, likely very small portion of customers who are POR UCB customers now, it's likely some suppliers would select some of those customers and dual bill them. But I think it's highly likely that the majority of those customers, because as the suppliers say, many of them say, we simply cannot do dual billing. It would take us time to implement. They would drop those customers.
Okay, so it sounds like the reality is that if we were to continue POR for contracts that were signed before January 1st, so we keep the mechanism in place, nothing changes. But if we say for new contracts, POR is not available, so that only dual billing would be permissible, the retail electric suppliers won't be able to make that happen until they have the software in place. Is that your understanding?
My understanding is that is true for the majority of them. Again, there are some, emphasizing very few, customers now dual billed. So we know there is some dual billing occurring now. But yes, they would likely, based on what we were told through the responses and then through the discussions was, it seems like a majority of the suppliers are not able to dual bill at all. They would need to bill that or wait until another UCB mechanism is in place before enrolling other customers.
Okay, I feel stuck in terms of trying to sort of understand the path forward, because we have this statute in place that gets rid of POR, and it seems like the problem we're running into is a software issue. And I read through all of the filings, and I'm not seeing a path forward that doesn't present a big problem, because we can't continue PORs until it seems to me for everything until the software is in place to allow for dual billing. Reading through the Potomac Edison filing, it seems like from their perspective, it's really I'm worried also about sort of a situation where we can't figure out what's new and what's not new in terms of contracts for retail electric supply, and I'm a little concerned about creating a situation where there is no new contracts for retail electric supply until we get the software issue fixed. Mr. Hoppe, can you help me?
Yeah, so I'll attempt to go through a couple of those. So in terms of the PE legal issue, and I would ask that staff council folks jump in at any point on this, our interim compliance recommendation, we recommend that the commission make very clear that the compliance obligation is on the suppliers and not the utility. So the compliance obligation for all new billing after January 1, enrollment of new customers, the obligation to use dual billing for those customers would be on the suppliers. My understanding is you could develop an EDI transaction to block for residential a non-dual billing enrollment after January 1 until we get another UCB mechanism in place. I believe the PHI companies recommended that. My understanding is it wouldn't take too long. And the requirement to not keep a customer on a contract that renews, that compliance obligation would be on the supplier, because we do agree with the utilities, they don't know when the contracts expire. So we proposed a specific reporting mechanism. It's where you saw, I don't know if it'd be helpful to go to the actual pages of the report. It's page 27 and 28. We provided example tables where all the suppliers would be required to report kind of all the contracts they have as of entered into before January 1, 2025, when those contracts expire, what service it is for, gas or electric, what utility, and when those contracts end, and then reporting after that that allows us to track, okay, if supplier X had 10 contracts that ended February 2025, there'd be reporting that we could see, okay, these customers were not renewed on POR.
Okay.
We would,
and Mr. Hoppick, how would this be a challenge for staff in terms of reviewing it? Because I am worried that we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we're going to have a lot of these contracts on the administrative agenda because of perceived violations. Is this a straightforward exercise that staff would be able to engage in, or are we creating more problems for ourselves in doing this? Recognizing that this is an interim step that we have to take.
Yeah, so there would be a lot of data. I don't think staff envisions being able to, go through every single table submitted. It's more likely a spot check mechanism, but it would also create a record of data and compliance for any action that the commission might take in the future if it is, determined or suspected that, a supplier, for example, kept a customer, basically renewed a customer under POR post January 1, 2025. And I did want to jump back a topic, if that's okay, in terms of, I think the new and renewed contracts after January 1, 2025, changing from pro rata to something else, it's just something that cannot be done before January 1. I think, we have statements, including from the suppliers, that they agree that basically the utilities, it's not possible for them to do it. So, we have dual billing kind of in all scenarios as the post January 1, 2025 for new and renewed contracts because of this, programming reality, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, all I'm doing is getting getting heartburn. I'm sorry. I mean, I am trying to sort of think through this. I'm Mr. Hoppick. I'm really concerned that we're going to just create a whole new category of challenges for addressing an issue that really is an interim problem. And I'm wondering if we're sort of creating almost too much in terms of trying to kind of move forward. Is there no way that we can, or the utilities can, make some adjustments to, rather than rebuild the program? Is there a way that sort of payment can come later, so that I understand that the payment goes immediately to the supplier, and the problem, a lot of the problem was that the utility had taken on the risk, and making payments later in the process shifts the risk where it should be to the supplier, and that would sort of involve additional tinkering, it's not a perfect solution. I'm just thinking that the all of the solutions I'm seeing right now are not addressing, they're not addressing the POR issue on the one hand, and they're creating a real challenge for retail suppliers to continue to stay in business. I'm actually not, I mean, unfortunately, I'm not seeing, and maybe others can help me with this, but I'm not seeing a good result for anybody in this.
So we did, as part of one of the homework assignments in the working group, ask about, you know, utilities. What if you just used whatever payment posting system you have now, the pre-POR system? How long would that take? And putting Potomac Edison on the spot, my recollection is they said we could do that in about 6 months, but then you're using the pre-POR payment posting mechanism, which the commission may or may not want to do, and then those also vary across the utilities. And it's my understanding, SMECO, they all have some form of payment posting, but SMECO, for example, never operated retail choice without POR.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Hoppick. Mr. Chair, I'm looking forward to hearing what other questions for the floor, Mr. Hoppick, but also what the other parties have to say. But I'm still pondering, and hopefully by the end of our hearing we'll have all the answers we need. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richard.
I think, let me see, where I don't have quite a understanding after Commissioner Suchman's questions, but just as far as, you know, what we're looking at for dual billing, for all, trying to understand your recommendation, so any new contract after January 1st, you are proposing that be a dual billed product? Is that correct? And then anything that renews, I guess that would be December 30th, would be.
Yeah. So, you know, per the new law, after December 31, January 2024. So as of January 1, you know, there's a requirement to no longer purchase or sell residential receivables. So a new post January 1 and a renewed post January 1 contract would need to be done through something other than POR. And the only mechanism that has been presented that seems like can actually happen is dual billing. For contracts that existed or were entered into on or before December 31, 2024, the supplier would be allowed to continue to be billed using POR UCB. So, did I?
Yeah, no, I think that just
details.
clarifies kind of what the situation is. So, with the new contracts, and this is probably something more to ask of the retail suppliers, but there are other requirements of these new retail products. Is that correct under SB1? I mean, the big one, of course, it has to be a product that is at or below the 12-month average of SOS. So
yes,
that'll be another requirement. And is that something that staff will be certifying or reviewing? I'm just trying to understand, when we get to December or January 1st, will we have products that the retail suppliers, do you anticipate, will be ready to offer Marylanders?
So, I mean, that's up to the retail suppliers. So through PC 64, I think in the last day or two, we just got some of the initial filings from the utilities showing the trailing 12-month average prices. So, you know, they'll have a couple months of those to see what those are. And then, they will need to make decisions about, can they beat those prices in terms of compliance. There's not a proposal to pre-approve these offers. I think at least staff is envisioning enforcement through, for example, the complaint process or other processes. But please note also, you had a July, and I'm hoping I'm getting the date right, the July, or maybe it was June 19th, do not transfer and cost reporting order, for lack of a better term, and that's going to require each utility for all residential customers, for example, to report by supplier, here's what customers paid, here's what customers paid per kilowatt hour, here's what customers paid per kilowatt hour, relative to what they would have paid on SOS. So there's going to be data that will exist in those filings, and we could see, here's a supplier, wow, the supplier XYZ, a lot of their customers, or the average cost for those customers looks to be well above SOS. And that could be a trigger, for example, to say, okay, a data request, for example, show us all your existing contracts post January 1, 2025. And then you could see, okay, yes, they're at or below the 12-month trailing average, or no, they're not at or below the 12-month trailing average.
Okay, and then also any December 31st, 2024 renewing contract, will those products have to be compliant with SB1, or will they just make it under the wire to continue under your recommendation under POR?
December 31st, 2024?
Yes,
Okay, yeah, no, that would be pre the 12-month. Before the trailing 12-month price cap. It's contracts on and after, and renewals on and after January 1, 2020.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to get a sense for, will there be a number of products January 1st that we'll even be concerned about that are compliant, and whether that should be reflected in our decision or not. But again, that'll probably be something I'd like to hear from retail suppliers. And I guess the only other is the pro rata versus payment posting recommendation. I think a concern raised by OPC and others is just simply the methodology that best protects the ratepayer from disconnections, and also from all ratepayers from the socialization of costs.
So first on the socialization issue, there is no, in a post POR UCB, there is no socialization of unpaid supplier charges. So, the recommendation in the report is that utilities be required to bill supplier charges at least 90 days, basically from the date they last send data, or a cancel rebill. And after that 90 days, the utilities would be able to say, okay, we have these outstanding supplier charges for customer ABC, supplier, we are removing these from our billing system, they are now your responsibility. So post POR UCB, there's no socialization.
Okay, that clarifies that issue. So
okay.
But
can you repeat your earlier question? I'm sorry.
I think that
it was a two-part question. Oh, it was pro rata versus payment posting, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It was just the protection afforded first of all, a customer from being disconnected.
So, with post POR UCB, you're only disconnected for failure to pay your utility charges. If you were to adopt, and putting OPC's example on the spot, and OPC, please correct me if you think I'm mischaracterizing, they have proposed a payment posting And this is only if a customer makes a partial payment, right?
Right. Well, that's the
Payment
situation I think we're most
pro-rata
concerned about.
Doesn't matter if the customer pays the whole bill, because everybody gets paid.
Right.
If the the OPC payment posting was adopted, you first pay utility arrearages, then you pay current utility charges, then supplier arrearages. So yes, a partial payment pays those utility arrearages first, making it less likely if the customer were to make a partial payment, they would be disconnected. That, staff is concerned about, creating a market where suppliers actually want to offer into the market, right? And if you're getting paid last after all utility charges, we think, suppliers are less likely to participate in that market. Again, I mentioned this in my initial remarks, for an SOS customer or a default gas service customer, your failure to pay the commodity part of your bill is part of your utility arrearage and can lead you to be terminated. So if we're in a post-POR UCB world, and for new and renewed contracts after January 1, we do have these price limitations. They're a trailing price limitation, but we do have these price limitations. Pro rata, you're kind of in a similar situation to an SOS customer, right? Because basically you have to pay the supplier arrearage and the utility arrearage to avoid disconnection because of how pro rata works, which is very similar to an SOS customer who should be paying about the same price, where you have to pay the utility part, the utility distribution arrearage, and the utility supply arrearage to avoid disconnection.
Okay, thank you. I think that explains the staff recommendation. That is, the preference, you're looking at the desirability of the Maryland market to retail suppliers going forward, and that's ultimately why you came down with the pro rata over the payment posting. So did I summarize that correctly?
I would add, if I may, additionally, pro rata is what's in existing COMAR. Admittedly, all the utilities proposed to implement POR, and then also pro rata is what the commission adopted for supplier consolidated. So there's also the precedent.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Barbe.
No, I think I wanted to ask a question about the pro rata issue, and I think that's been handled by Commissioner Richards' question. So nothing right now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so let me do this. I want to bring up the utilities first and let them respond to this. Then I'm going to turn to the retail suppliers, end up with OPC. But this is not a situation where you get to speak once. After everybody's said their initial positions, I actually want some crosstalk between the various parties to see if we can figure some way through the woods on this. So let's, like I said, let's start with the utilities, and why don't you just come up to the table. Alrighty, Mr. Seegers, go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good morning. The Exelon Joint Utilities, we filed our comments. I think they pretty much speak for themselves. Just to highlight a few points regarding staff's recommendation that the commission set June 1st, 2026 as the date certain by which the utilities must make a full transition to a non-POR residential billing system. We just want to emphasize that a specific deadline by which we need to accomplish this, it can't really be identified until the commission makes a number of determinations, not only in terms of the payment posting versus the pro rata, but all of the other issues that accompany that. And I believe that that Potomac Edison also made that comment in their comments. And it is, as we've said before, we will need approximately about 12 to 18 months to implement that, but that's 12 to 18 months from when we know how all of those issues are going to be worked out. Number two, numerous parties to this proceeding, including the Exelon Joint Utilities, have expressed concerns about adopting the pro rata methodology versus a payment posting methodology. First and foremost, the pro rata methodology will result in customers who make partial payments being disconnected sooner, as opposed to a payment posting methodology. And moreover, the pro rata approach, it could be more costly and take more time to implement, since the utilities would essentially have to design and implement that system from scratch. In addition, the pro rata allocation methodology could cause confusion for customers who would not know how their payments, the partial payments that they're making, how they're being allocated. Number three, regarding the late fees for the post-POR utility consolidated billing supplier charges, we noted in our comments that Maryland Utilities, we would not be able to do or fulfill staff's recommendation for the simple fact that we do not calculate the late fees that the suppliers are including in the numbers that they send to us, and we have no insight in terms of what portion of a supplier's charges, including late fees. What we do is we get what's called it's called a bill ready number, and that is what we place on our bill. We don't have any insight in terms of what goes into that number. Number four, regarding staff's treatment of utility deposits under both the proposed pro rata and the payment posting allocation methodologies, we urge the Commission to reject staff's proposals contrary to Commission policy. What we're specifically talking about is where staff has the utility deposit in the allocation methodology for both pro rata and payment posting. It's towards the bottom for both. And what we believe is that the deposits should be available to limit the size of the uncollectible bills that would otherwise become the responsibility of all of our other customers. And finally, and I know there's already been some discussion about this during staff's presentation, but as we discussed during the Commission's earlier hearing on SB1, the dual billing approach really is the only feasible method we have for complying with the requirement in SB1 that the purchase of receivables must stop for new and renewed contracts as of January 1, 2025. We understand that in the Commission's order, you noted that it was not your preferred alternative, and we also understand that the supplier position is that they can't go to a dual billing, but unfortunately, there is no other alternative that we have in order to satisfy the January 1st, 2025 deadline that's specified in the statute. Those conclude our opening comments, and we are available if you have any questions.
So let me do this. If there's any clarifying questions for the companies as we're going through it, we'll ask those. But if there's sort of broad policy ones affecting the whole group, why don't we hold that till we get done with everybody? So,
I think this is a clarifying question. You just heard Mr. Hoppick, talk about the fact that pro rata is precedent, and also what I think he said we already do. Could you respond directly to that? I'm just trying to get an understanding, because you seem to indicate that it's not policy. So,
well, and I'll let Mr. Hoppick speak if I'm mischaracterizing staff's position, but I believe what the report said is that it's precedent in the sense that it is currently in COMAR, in the sense that utilities have the ability to choose either a purchase of receivable methodology or a pro rata methodology. But I would also note that a payment posting, I believe, is also in precedent, because in both the PEPCO and the Delmarva Power tariffs, we have a payment posting methodology that was approved by this commission, and it's clearly specifies how a partial payment is to be allocated. So I think an argument could also be made that this commission has also determined that payment posting is just as reasonable.
Commissioner Barbe. I have nothing, thank you. Commissioner Schlesman.
Mr. Seegers, is there a computer person that you brought with you that would be able to answer specific software questions? Unless, of course, you can. I can tell you I couldn't.
And I'm in the same boat as you, Commissioner. We do have some subject matter experts who are familiar with, our systems, and if you want to ask your question, we can see who the appropriate person would be to try to respond.
Okay, so you don't have anybody, because this is actually, to me, this is kind of critical, because I keep hearing everybody say we can't do it because of software issues. So I think we need to talk to the person who is responsible for the software issues so that we can understand what can and can't be done. So, for example, my understanding is that the way that the system is set up now, as soon as a bill goes out, the supplier is immediately paid, and so there the risk falls on the utility, but that's okay because they discounted the POR, and if you can't get it one way, you'll get it through arrearages. So everybody's happy. I'm wondering if there is a way to delay the payment so that the system stays in place, but if the payment is not made, so the bill goes out, but payment is delayed to the supplier until the customer pays, then we have less of a problem, it seems to me, with the issue around risk, because the supplier doesn't receive payment until the customer pays, and so I'm wondering if there's a way to do that, because I'm not seeing a good path forward. And it just seems to me that if the only people that are in the room are lawyers, then that's a problem. I think we need to talk to the subject matter experts, since everybody keeps falling back on we can't do it because it's a software issue.
Your Honor, I'll take a stab. I'm not a software person, but I think it's.
Okay. Is this Ms. Sikora? Because I can't.
I'm sorry. Yes, this is Ms. Sikora. I'm not sure what more our software people would say. I mean, there's programming logic. You've got, right now I don't know how many. We've got thousands of customers. We're sending out thousands of bills. We're getting thousands of payments. I'm not sure that holding off on making any payment until somebody makes a payment, that's just the first step. So then what happens when the customer does make a payment and say, if it is a full payment, it still has to kind of go through figuring out how much of that full payment was for the utility bill, how much was for the supplier portion of the bill. The system still has to go through and do that addition and make sure that it's getting split up appropriately. The bigger problem comes in when the customer does make that payment and it's not the full amount of the bill, figuring out, how much do each of the parties get? How much does BGE get? How much does the supplier get? Going through here's all the different elements. There's utility arrearages, potentially, if there's any, utility current charges, supplier arrearages, what is the allocation of this partial payment to all of those different elements? And that's the part where it's going to take programming logic. Someone in back there kind of saying, how do I deal with all this stuff? And then also, it's then taking that forward to making sure that, you know, again, with BGE, and I'm sure all the utilities have systems to deal with, you know, our arrearages, and when a customer then needs to go into the collection process, making sure that we're only picking up the BGE or utility arrearages and sending those off to the collection process, not any arrearages for the supplier arrearages. You know, right now under POR, as soon as we purchase the, you know, supplier charges, everything becomes a utility arrearage, and so there's not necessarily that distinction. So there's all these different components that have to get programmed into the system to figure out how these dollars get allocated, and then kind of all the downstream different impacts.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just wondering how much of a problem this would be. Because we're sort of, if we do something else, we're creating a whole new problem. And I don't see a scenario, if we follow the staff's recommendation, I don't see a scenario where the retail electric supply industry is not going to be hurt in a big way. I just don't see because we can't do dual billing, and everybody kind of agrees that at this point now there is no dual billing in place. So I'm just wondering if we tinker with the program in not a big way, and that's why I was hoping that we had some kind of software person. If there's a tinkering that we could delay payment to the retail electric supplier, and then have this subset of situations where a customer either doesn't pay their bill or they do a partial bill, given that this is, again, just an interim step, and it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, maybe it won't be the full 18 months, that we'd have to sort of deal with this, recognizing that there is no, I don't think we're going to find a perfect solution. I'm just trying to figure out, and maybe we have to think outside the box a little bit, how can we kind of move forward where we're implementing what the legislature wants us to do, but we're not breaking the system, because that we don't want a situation where the retail electric supply industry goes belly up. That can't be a good result either.
Commissioner Suchman, I want to assure you that we have talked extensively with our software people, and the software people, you know, they are doing the coding behind the scenes. We, the people that kind of understand how this is supposed to work, are the ones that have to tell them what to program. So, you know, I don't know that, we certainly could bring someone here, but I don't know that they're going to be able to say anything different than, you know, what we're telling you that they said, because it's still a matter of figuring out, okay, what do we do? And that's what we really have been racking our minds to figure out. We did in the work group. We even had a separate call with the retail suppliers to kind of figure out some other options. You know, we're just, you know, we're at a loss, just like you are. You know, unfortunately, the General Assembly didn't give us much time.
I understand. We're sort of faced. It's October. We're faced with the situation, and we have to find a path forward, recognizing that we don't have to fix everything in that 6 months to a year. We just have to try to find a situation that's as fair as it possibly can be to all parties in place, so that the customers are protected, and the retail electric suppliers are protected, and the utility is protected, and everything sort of fits into place. I'm just sort of wondering. I really think that we have to get the software people in. I mean, I'm just wondering if there's a way that transactions can be run in a different way. I'm again, sometimes I have trouble turning on my computer, so I am not the computer person. It just seems to me that there has to be some way to thread this needle in the short term recognizing that in the long term, there's going to be dual billing until maybe some other way that can find a UCB approach can be found.
Commissioner, this is Matt Seegers again. Unfortunately, I don't believe there is any time when we can make a quick and easy fix to our billing system. It is always very complex. It is usually not inexpensive either. But you also have to, I mean, as I said before, we need to know exactly how it's going to work, but also we need to be able to determine all of the downstream effects of the change that we're making. This is the same, it's the same billing system that goes across all of our, our entire business. So we would need to be able to understand how that's going to work. So I'm not sure, I mean, as Ms. Sikora said, I don't think there is like a quick and easy fix to this.
And
Again, Mr. Seegers, I feel like we, I think having only lawyers in the room is not helping. I really feel like we need to get the person who sort of runs this stuff. Maybe they can find or suggest some sort of some patch or some sort of external sort of everything kind of goes in, but then you sort of plug in that payments don't get made to the retail electric supplier until the customer pays.
But
All right, well, actually, let me make a suggestion. So why don't we put together a number of questions that may be technical and in the weeds questions.
Right.
We will submit it to the utilities. You submit it to your computer folks and get the best answer back to us as you can, as opposed to trying to do it orally today. We'll make an attempt to make the questions as precise as we can, to deal with this. And then if you can send that on to your computer folks and have them respond back to us, maybe that's the way to get this thing going.
I do have a quick question, though.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah. So, in my experience, software rollouts of only a year and a half are rare. Usually they take longer. That's my concern, especially when you have a very large customer data set as you do. So here's my question to you, and I'm sure I know the answer, but ask your data people about this and please get back to us. I would presume that in building up your software system that you're going to run in parallel, meaning your people are going to, as they're rolling out the new software, they're also simultaneously in parallel using the systems that are currently in operation in order to be checking the results to make sure nothing goes wrong. Just go to your people, ask them that question, have them report back to us, because I just want to make sure that it's happening that way, because I've seen many instances in the private sector where a parallel run didn't happen and bad things occurred, and they were very difficult to figure. It was very difficult to figure out where the mistakes were, because typically speaking, these software rollouts, no matter how hard you try to do it correctly, problems will occur. So if you could have your people respond to that, I'd very much appreciate it.
Certainly.
Commissioner Barbie, I will say, I kept talking about programming, but equally as important to the programming is the testing, to make sure that what you program works how you intended it. And that is kind of along the lines of what you're saying. You're trying to make sure that what you program, again, not just with the billing system, but all of our downstream systems, did those intended consequences, are there no unintended consequences? And, sometimes the programming, well, not the easy part, it's okay, this system touches this system that touches, so let's make sure that all the downstream, and that's really where, you can have time, the time consuming. And I'll say, our billing system is not something that, we take it very seriously. We don't ever want to send incorrect bills to our customers. We don't want to cause confusion by not thoroughly testing changes to make sure that what we intended is what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate hearing that from you. I know from the private sector that that's exactly what businesses with large customer data sets, that's the attitude that they tend to take. I will say that I think a year and a half would be pretty impressive if a company were able to pull off a software rollout and have it be, more than 95% correct. That would be very impressive, because I'm under no illusions here. Even the most effective data rollout is going to have a percentage of mistakes. It's really unavoidable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so do you have any other comments apart from what you've been saying so far?
I don't believe so.
No, I'm actually talking to.
Oh, no, I don't.
Oh,
Thank you.
Okay, so Smecco.
Sure. Good morning again, Mr. Chair Hoover. Damon Krieger on behalf of Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative. So I think our core points were all stated in our August 9th filing, so I won't repeat any of those. Certainly appreciate the very robust working group process, and I think a lot of the nuances were definitely fleshed out within the scope of the working group process. It was on an expedited pace, but all of the parties responded to many, many data requests, much, if not all of which was attached to staff's report. So I think maybe some of the answers to your questions could be already included and have been addressed by the utilities in those data request responses. A couple quick points, some in response to the questions being posed. I would say as a general matter, anything is possible with sufficient time, money, and resources. For the cooperative, it's a value proposition. We are strained in all three of those buckets, and we have lots of projects that are ongoing that are of high value to our customer members. And so to implement a new project requires us to remove resources from another project. And so that's always an ongoing concern as well. I think to Commissioner Barbay's question, the straight answer to it is that we operate, whenever we add new logic to our customer care and billing system, we have a test environment. So we work within the test environment as part of programming that new logic. We never take the CCMB system offline, though. So it's always an active system because we have to keep generating monthly bills. So it never goes offline, but we do have a test environment to ensure that the new logic flows through the system. If that makes sense. A couple other points just in response to, I think, some of the contents of staff's reports and what's been said today. So as is mentioned in our comments as well, the cooperative is not subject to supplier consolidated billing, and so reference to this notion of pro rata being precedential, at least as to the cooperative, we have only worked within a POR environment when it comes to retail supply since day one, and so that's how our system is set up, that's how it is programmed, that is how it's configured. So whatever direction the commission provides at the end of the day, we will have to reprogram the logic to correspond with the new directives, as will be the case with all the utilities. But for us, we have no legacy system when it comes to addressing third-party supply. So just an important consideration for the cooperative specifically. We do continue to favor the payment posting priority in the same manner that OPC has put forth in its comments. So I think we're aligned with respect to how payments that come in should be allocated as between the various charges to ensure at the end of the day that customers remain in service. I mean, that's the core goal for us. And it hasn't been addressed, I think, yet today, but it's been addressed throughout the working group process and in comments, the handling of energy assistance. We do want to make sure that energy assistance hits the utility charges and other fees first and foremost, again, with the notion that the direct link between energy assistance is with the utility and with the overarching goal to keep customers in service. And so that's where that assistance is best aligned, particularly in the cooperative's case. I do want to second Ms. Sikора's comment with respect to when you talk about payments coming in. At the end of the day, there is an important link to collections and the collection process, and that shouldn't go focused on in connection with this proceeding. At the end of the day, it's about making sure that either the utility is obviously paid or the third-party supplier, and how they ensure that they get those funds in. And so under the current system, as was indicated with POR, since the utility, it's that we are able to collect either ourselves or through a third-party agent. As we move forward in this new environment, we will no longer, the idea is to separate collection between the two entities. So that's an important consideration. We don't want to be, nor are we required to be, the collection agent for third-party suppliers anymore. And so that's just an important consideration to keep in mind. I think the last thing, just because I am still confused on this point, and I do think we need some direction when it comes to POR and the sunset date, so to speak. The notion of when a contract expires or is renewed, I mean, those are fungible terms. You could have a contract that never expires. The prices are just change over time. So are we talking about the price terms or are we talking about the contract? Because that does have some context to what we're talking about. You can have a contract that's perpetual. It just keeps going on, and it's either subject to termination by one or both parties by mutual agreement, but the prices could change along the way. So I think what we're really most concerned about is the prices, the terms. And so I do think at some point we need to establish what we're talking about with respect to the contract, because arguably the supplier could say, well, the contract was executed into pre-January 1st, 2025. It never ends. So what does that mean with respect to POR? All that we're changing is the pricing terms. We're not terminating the contract. And so I do think there are some games that could be played here if we're not careful, to the detriment of our customers. So with that, I am here. I am also accompanied by Tammy Gardner, who's our Vice President for Customer Operations. She is not a software expert, but she has at least a high-level appreciation, understanding for our customer care and billing systems, and more importantly, the relationships with our customer members and how we work through our billing processes. So happy to bring her to the table as well if there are any questions. But here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Commissioner Barbie, any questions for
No, thank you.
Commissioner Richard?
Not really a question, but I just wanted to say I was very interested in what Commissioner Suchman was asking for in her questions. I think when you look at the intent of the legislation is, we were asked to end POR, by January. So we're trying to work our way around that. If there are some ways to look at the system, the billing system, the timing issue is intriguing to me, because I believe that the intent really is to shift the risk back from the utilities to the suppliers when it comes to the to possible lack of payment. So, I mean, if there is something that could be simply, I think you put it, Commissioner Suchman, as a sort of a tweak or something with the system as it currently exists to maybe meet the intent of the legislation in the near term and protect all the parties, that's something worth looking into. So I don't want to, ignite the whole discussion again, but I think we'll hopefully have some good questions to ask per the chairman's suggestion, and see if we can actually work together to come up with a solution so we meet the legislative intent of what we're trying to achieve. So anyway, I just wanted to be supportive of what I believe Commissioner Suchman was asking, and see if we can find those kind of solutions. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just to
Okay,
briefly
Mr.
respond to that,
Okay, go ahead.
we certainly have done a lot of scenario planning to try
Okay.
to think creatively out of the box. At the end of the day, all the scenarios require logic, program changes to our system. The good thing for us is we are in the process of implementing an upgrade to our CCMB system. So it's not a bad time, but we need to know the directives in order to sort of tag to that project. So there is, and I think we stressed this in our comments, there is an importance in terms of knowing what we need to do sooner than later so that we can hopefully reduce the cost impact for moving forward. But all of the scenarios require changes to our system to implement. And we have been working closely with our primary vendor to run those scenarios to understand the time. And as we said, right now, at least for a core scenario, we're talking 9 to 12 months. And that's working, that's probably pushing some other core projects aside so that we can focus on this compliance requirement. So
Okay.
there's
Well,
certainly
the legislative requirement should also be a core
It is.
requirement. So I think we to the extent we can think creatively, I just wanted to offer my support to what Commissioner Suchman was asking. So.
Absolutely, and we stand ready to certainly respond to any potential scenarios offered by the commission. We do think, as we've proffered in our comments, that the simplest, the easiest solution is dual billing, at least for a temporary period, and there is no right to utility consolidated billing, right? There's no right to that, at least to my knowledge, and so certainly something that seems to be preferred by the retail suppliers because it saves them investment requirement on their end. There's no question about that. We appreciate that. And our system is currently configured in a way that we can implement dual billing day one, meaning January 1st. And so we are prepared to do that. And if it's on a temporary basis, that at least gives us the time that we need to put the permanent system in place. So that's why it is the easiest, and at least, is it creative? I don't know if it's creative, but it's a viable option. So we are trying to think out of the box in order how to do that, and that would be sort of our initial, what we think is the easy solution to comply with the law and move forward.
Right. But as Commissioner Sussman pointed out, I mean, is that also a fair approach to the retail supplier? So I think those are all the questions we have to weigh and see if we can find a good solution. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Sussman.
Okay, so I actually had a different question, but based on Commissioner Richards' line of questioning, so for dual billing, so SMECO would be ready to go sooner rather than later on dual billing. How would that work?
So the answer is yes, we are ready to go sooner than later on dual billing. And it would work effectively as it does today, is we would be able to transmit usage information to the third-party supplier. They would then process their own bill and send that to their customer for the supply charges, and we would send our bill for the utility and all of the other fees and charges as we do.
Okay, so the utility wouldn't send out two bills.
That's correct.
But could you do that? Could the utility send out, again, I'm just thinking outside the box, could the utility send out two bills with the second bill saying, this is for your usage, your supply usage, and you should pay your supplier?
So we're certainly not set up to do that. Again, anything is possible with time, money, and resources, but our system is currently not configured to do that. That is correct.
Okay. So my question, my earlier question, or my original question, relates to a concern I had raised with Mr. Hoppick earlier about how you determine what's a new contract versus an old contract, a renewed contract. I mean, and some of the concerns that you have, that you just raised, are concerns that I have, that it may not be clear. And even if we were to lay out what constitutes a new contract, there certainly could be situations that come up that we didn't anticipate now that will require that we have an administrative meeting to deal with certain issues. But I guess the question is, do you feel like you are in a position to be able to, because you're asking us to give you guidance, and I guess I'm asking if you can give us guidance. Do you have suggestions on what you think should constitute a new contract or a renewed contract versus a contract that just continues on?
I honestly haven't thought to that granular level. I do think Mr. Hoppick's point earlier about the compliance requirements should fall on the third-party suppliers. That is foundational. We certainly agree with that wholeheartedly. And whether that's through reporting or other means, they have to demonstrate with certainty as to the fact that the customer that they have a relationship with has an active contract in compliance with whatever requirements are set up by the commission.
No, and
That's
I appreciate
foundational.
that. And I agree that it should be the onus should be on the retail electric supplier. I'm just asking whether you have an idea of what should constitute a new or a renewed contract, or do you or I guess the other question is, do you anticipate that we could see some litigation because it's not always clear what's a new or renewed contract and what's just a continuation of or an existing contract?
What I would say is that there's certainly ambiguity here, as it sounds like you recognize, and that certainly could lead to a complaint being filed with the commission from a concerned customer. If the price, it all comes back to if there's something to complain about. And so, to me, the core term is the price, as I indicated earlier. And so maybe it's a matter of whether through rulemaking eventually or through commission order, clarifying, when we talk about expiration, we're not necessarily talking about the contract, but we're talking about the offered price, the offered supply price, because that's really what we're talking about at the end of the day or at least it's going to be of most concern to our customer members is how do they compare the supply price from the third party to our standard offer service price. And so making sure that when it comes to POR, they're working within, we're talking about a non-expired price term.
Yeah.
But it
So
is a
just-
challenging one because
Right,
there are lots of
it's just
perpetual
adding to
contracts.
Right, it's adding to the complexity
It-
of
it
the issue
Agreed.
that I think, I guess if it were to go on forever, I would have less concern about. But it sort of adds to the complexity of an issue that is for a finite period, and so that's kind of my concern in going down that path.
I mean, the solution we tried to offer in the last hearing was that and it sounded like, or at least from the commission's initial order, it felt like that there was some appreciation for a singular cutoff date, so we know for certain when those contracts end and then the new contracts start. That to me is the best practical solution still, which is
Yes, but then the issue is what's a new contract? That's sort of my concern.
I appreciate that. I do think if there's a date certain, at least we know that anything after that date is effectively a new contract. The renewal, I mean, that probably is even more gray, and then again, the expiration is the one that concerns me probably the most. I don't know what that means as currently scripted in the legislation, so.
Can I jump in? Hadn't really thought about this till now, but this assumption is that we would only be purchasing under staff's proposal contracts that were already enrolled in our system prior to January 1st of 2025. We would be working to get the replacement UCB methodology, whether it's the pro rata or the payment posting priority, in place. We're saying 12 to 18 months. Staff's saying 20 months. I would think when we got to the point of having that new UCB system, that the burden would be on suppliers for any of the contracts that at that time were, right before then were still on POR, for them to demonstrate why those contracts were still appropriately being, the receivables were being purchased. Just the, thought that I had in my head, again, it's not ideal because then we're having, purchaser receivables out there for, quite a while. But, that might be an appropriate time to say, okay, suppliers, the utilities are getting ready to be able to implement this replacement UCB. You still have however many contracts that they're purchasing the receivables for. You demonstrate that, this is a new or renewed contract and that it's still appropriately having the receivables purchased, and then a decision could be, made then. And then you could even say, supplier, much longer, do you expect, or, how long do you think this contract will continue to be, able to have the purchases, receivables purchased? Top of my head, sitting here, thoughts?
Okay, so what you're suggesting, Mr. Cora, is that the bright line is what's in the system now. So if it's not in the system, it will be by default a new contract, and therefore POR cannot be in that. But for everything in the system, we're just going to treat it as an existing contract until the new system is in place, and then all PORs will be off the system.
I think that's an option for doing it. I mean, I think that's what it was our going in, that any contract that the customer or that the supplier wants to enroll starting January 1st would have to be, under the dual billing or whatever, comes about, but it'd be the ones that were already in place as of the end of the year would continue on POR.
Okay.
And that's certainly consistent with our existing assumption. If it's not enrolled in the system now, we would assume it is not an existing contract. So, and we certainly have the logic in place right now, so we know if a contract is enrolled because it's being processed under POR now.
Right.
So that coding exists. So I do think that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention that SB1, the legislation did include a prohibition against evergreen contracts beyond a certain length. It put a time limit on the length of contracts, so at some point, pretty much every contract is going to have to expire and be renewed or become a new contract. The one possible exception to that is if you enter into an evergreen contract before December 31st, you might be able to argue that the legislation is not allowed to impair those contracts by its own terms, and that could continue in perpetuity. And so, I mean, the commission might want to consider ruling on that possibility between now, sooner rather than later.
All right, Potomac Edison.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Jessica Raba on behalf of Potomac Edison. I think all of the points that we made in our Monday filing have already been raised, so I'll just touch upon them briefly. You've already heard the concern over setting this June 1st date without starting down the path of answering the myriad of questions we have to answer before we can actually begin implementing any sort of non-POR system. Because you've heard some different dates, I'll offer, our comments, like the other utilities, favor the payment posting method over pro rata for the same reasons you've heard the other utilities state. The reason why we can offer a 6-month timeline for that versus an 18-month timeline for pro rata is simply because there is already a default payment posting methodology built into our existing billing system, SAP, whereas if we go down the path of pro rata, we have to start from scratch to build that. So that's why you heard those two different dates thrown out for Potomac Edison. The third point Commissioner Suchman teed up, I think, for us, which is, as you just heard, the further discussion about, utilities' reliance on suppliers for what contracts are what. We're kind of at their mercy. We are fine with staff's proposal to hold the suppliers accountable as long as we're all on the same page that the utilities are not responsible for policing this and that we won't be held responsible for an inadvertent purchase of a receivable that we shouldn't have purchased. I think that was everything I wanted to raise, but we're here. I also have some subject matter experts with me to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay, Mr. Richard?
No questions.
Mr. Barbe?
No questions.
Mr. Sussman? Okay, so Commissioner Sussman, go ahead.
Well, I think Mr. Hoppick has had his hand up for a while, so I'm going to let him weigh in, and then I'll pick up.
Okay, all right. Then go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Commissioner Suchman. So on the issue of potential evergreen contracts, staff's interim compliance mechanism, the reporting we're asking for specifically says, you have to tell us for each utility service area and, service type, gas and electric, when contracts end. That would also include suppliers being required to tell you if they have evergreen contracts. So if you look on page 27 of the staff report, you can see there's an evergreen entry there. There's also the example table on page 28. So I wanted to, we were thinking about that in what we wrote about the interim compliance mechanism. So just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Suchman.
Yeah, so Ms. Reba, you have a subject matter expert, presumably a computer person.
I do have a computer person.
Yay! Right. I mean, lawyers are important, but at some point we really need people who actually know what's going on. So,
thank you.
I won't take that personally.
Yeah.
I could turn on my.
And this person, I can't see you. So, who are you? If you can.
So I actually have a couple folks with me today. would you be willing to ask your question so I can put the right person at the microphone?
Yeah, I guess the question is the question I asked earlier. Is there a way that the program can be manipulated in some fashion that would delay payment to the retail electric supplier so that we don't. I mean, it seems to me that the situation is retail electric suppliers getting paid before the customer pays the utility. So then the utility takes on the risk of the customer paying or not paying. Is there a way in which the program, at least for purposes of PE, I mean, I know that your experts can't speak to the programs of the other utilities, but is there a way in which the payment could be delayed so that the bill goes out and the supplier is paid only when the customer pays the utility, and then I guess sort of added to that can payment posting be implemented at that point so that if there's a partial payment, the first payment is made to the demand charge, and then so the customer doesn't get disconnected, and then to the extent there is anything left, then the supplier gets paid.
So I'll offer and then ask Chris Carr, manager of power billing and supplier operations, to chime in if I misspeak. But I think our answer is going to be exactly what Ms. Sikora said, which is we can do what you're explaining, but we can't do it tomorrow, right? So we still have to put programming in place to make that happen. And, 6 months is really our best. I think what you're describing is a lot like the payment posting methodology that we're proposing here, and that OPC is proposing. We still have to program and test that, though. So you're still looking at
Right,
6 months.
Right. It is like that. I mean, but it's avoiding that initial payment to the retail electric supplier. It's holding off, and then sort of to the extent that the company only receives partial payment, then the payment posting method will sort of kick in. But I guess. I guess the question is this something that can be done before the full change out is required?
I don't think so, for the reasons I just said. I don't even know. I haven't fully wrapped my head around the thought of us just sitting for months on end on suppliers' receivables at the outset, or how the suppliers would feel about that.
And I don't think there's any question that we don't want to put in place an approach that takes care of one problem and then creates a whole new set of problems.
Yep.
That we don't want.
Right.
Especially because, again, this is going to be just an interim measure. But I guess if your subject matter experts have any response to that, or we can, the chair has asked us to put together a list of questions, and we can certainly provide that to your subject matter expert as well, so that we don't have to put them on the spot and they can kind of go back and think about it. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Thank you. And we'd be more than happy to respond to those questions.
That's great. All right, thank you.
Can I?
So, Mr. Hoppick, do you have something else to add, or are you hands still just up?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So, if you're withholding payment until the customer pays, you are doing UCB without POR. So the suggestion is to implement, non-POR UCB would be one comment. And then just briefly, I wanted to make sure to note, and I don't know that WGL Energy, not WGL, the utility is in the room, but WGL Energy, they did make a filing and they did support the interim staff proposal, which does include the dual billing for new and renewed after January 1, 2025, until other UCB is available. So we do have a supplier representative supporting that option. So I just wanted to
Sure. Okay.
put that on the record. Thank you.
Okay, fine. So why don't you guys stay where you are? Let me turn to the retail suppliers and Mr. Green, if you want to come up here at the end, or if you want to go at the podium, doesn't matter to
You
me.
can sit right in the middle.
Or there, yeah. Or you can sit, you can sit amongst your friends.
We don't
so.
fight.
Just to start out, I have no background in software, so so Brian Green for the Retail Energy Supply Association, NRG Energy, and Clean Choice Energy. We, like everyone else, filed comments on Monday. We tried to keep them as short as possible. We appreciate. We were overall pleased with staff's recommendations, except for the one that we've been talking about today, and that involves enrolling new or customers after one or on or after 1/1/25 and renewing customers after 1/1/25. They seem to be the middle of the donut because there's no way to send them a bill. So, and I want to say three things, more or less, three things about that. Is that we do appreciate that staff is acknowledging that, and the commission has acknowledged that dual billing is not the preferred option. And I've heard things in the last hour that people have referred to dual billing as, let me see if I can get it here, viable, feasible, simple, easy. And Mr. Hoppick explained that there are some suppliers dual billing now. So I want to talk about this because in our coalition are 12 suppliers, and then they have affiliates as well. But it's a very large market share and a large number of suppliers operating in Maryland today, electric and gas, from small suppliers all the way up to the most sophisticated supplier you can think of. So the overwhelming unanimous feedback is that they've not built out their systems to dual bill. They're not, and dual billing is more than just the bill, right? It's the system component, but then there's the rest of it that goes the customer relationship. I will tell you that in every contract right now that I have ever seen in 25 years of doing this work for a residential customer, there is a paragraph on billing that says you will get one bill from your utility. It will have our charges in it, and you should pay it on time, or you will pay the late fees that are in your utilities tariff, right? That's in every contract. There is nothing in there about dual billing. There's nothing in there about changing a billing method, right? So that's a hurdle in addition to the programmatic changes that a supplier would have to do to alter an existing contract. And then you have the issue of customers have never received two energy bills before for the same commodity, right? So there's going to be customer confusion. And one of the reasons that we've never done this in the past is because residential customers don't want two bills for their electricity. So the whole customer experience with the supplier is going to be severely tarnished. It is going to be a negative experience if we can even get that far to send a dual bill. And I want to make one last comment on this, is that Mr. Hoppick mentioned their suppliers in the market today. We've been very careful in all of our comments to say that we're talking about doing dual billing at scale, right? It is very possible to manually dual bill a customer or 100 customers. And I think what Mr. Hoppick is talking about in the market today, Mr. Hoppick can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is there may be a couple hundred dual billing residential customers. I don't know why they're on dual billing. I don't know the suppliers that are offering it, but it's not. We're talking what needs to be thousands and thousands, right? There's 300,000, give or take, approximately, shopping customers residential today, or at least as of the end of June, I think was the last enrollment report. So when we're talking about the new customers after 1/1/25 and the renewed customers, they wouldn't have a UCB option, and they wouldn't have a dual billing option, so there's no way to send them a bill. So that I mean, Commissioner Suchman, you nailed it, right? I mean, that's the problem. You can't even look at what products can I even offer in that market if you have no way to send a bill to the customer. So, and once you're out, my fear is that they're not coming back. There's no other state or jurisdiction that mandates dual billing as the only option, and I would also add that there's nothing in SB1 that requires or obligates a pause or a temporary or a permanent halt to UCB, and there's nothing in SB1 that says that mandates dual billing. So I think when you look at all of the Electric Choice Act and the Natural Gas Act, and especially Section 7-504, the goals and purposes of the Act have always been to create competition, and that was not changed among the other goals and purposes that are in there. But that has not changed. SB1 changed a lot of the types of offers you can make and the types of contracts you can offer, and a lot of provisions about non-green and green products, and disclosures, and really focused on reining in what was perceived to be misleading and marketing practices and excessive prices. It was those two issues. So but the goal of creating a competitive market and sustaining that market has not changed. So when we looked at this, it seems like everyone's focusing on the utilities shift or transition to a non-POR UCB and saying, okay, well, how long is it going to take you? How long is it going to take you? What can we do in the interim? And by the way, we have no qualms about the time period that the utilities are expressing. Our clients, our members have gone through sincere system changes and system upgrades and so forth, and that's just how long it takes. And actually a lot of the, I shouldn't say a lot, some of my clients deal with the same third-party vendors in doing those upgrades that the utilities do. So we have a good understanding of how long these things take, and we take them at their word that it does take that 18 roughly month time period from the time they get their requirements of what has to be in the new system. My clients have said that it takes 12 to 18 months, depending on the company and the vendor and so forth, to be able to send dual bills at scale. So given all of that, and to protect the intent and purposes of the Electric Choice Act as a harmonious whole, our proposal was very simple, and that's allow POR to continue for everybody until the utility is able to adopt a UCB non-POR system. And at that point, if the commission wanted to make that the date certain to end POR for everybody, then that would be an appropriate way to do it. But I don't think the General Assembly intended this kind of technological hole that we found ourselves in, and it puts the commission in a terrible spot. So our way out is not to throw a dart at the intent and the goals of the Electric Choice Act by telling these suppliers, I'm sorry, you just can't operate here for new customers or for renewed customers, but allow it to proceed under looking at the intent of all of of what SB1 didn't say, but then what the Electric Choice does. And then the last thing, I want to just do a quick shift over to the pro rata system. We support that, and I think Mr. Hoppeck very nicely summarized in his opening remarks the support for pro rata. And the only thing that I would add on the pro rata is that this is actually the third time. Some of us in this room are getting old, so this is the third time I've had this dispute, this discussion about pro rata. And actually, the facts line up more in favor of a pro rata system now than they did a few years ago for the supplier consolidated billing discussion. And that issue, by the way, was I would say, top 3 hottest issues of all the issues in SCB. And the commission decided to do a pro rata. But here you have a situation where suppliers are can't market to energy assistance households under the statute from a couple years ago, right? There won't be continuing purchase of receivable program down the road, and then we have the price caps to deal with and all of the other limitations of SB1. So all of that mitigates the risk of service terminations in addition to what Mr. Hoppick said this morning. So the facts actually line up more in favor of a pro rata system today than they have in the past. So that's all the comments I have, and I'm certainly available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, so before I go to that,
Two things. One is I am not aware of any provision in the SB1 legislation that would allow the commission to allow POR to continue after January 1. It's a pretty flat out prohibition. So that's the problem with that suggestion. I would, however, second what Mr. Green said with respect to the payment posting versus pro rata. Mr. Sager said earlier that we have precedent for payment posting because it's in their tariffs, but I would note that those provisions predate the Commission's COMAR that required either POR or pro rata. And that was because we had this discussion, and the pro rata, the payment posting arrangement the utilities did beforehand did not work in any way in terms of promoting or allowing a retail supply market, precisely because suppliers don't have the ability to terminate customer service. And if you reinstitute payment posting essentially as it was before then, you'll have the same issue.
okay.
And I would only respond to the first part, is that we acknowledge that sections 8 and 9 of SB1 say what they say. I just don't think it's practical, and I don't think the General Assembly knew what was the hole they were stepping into, and that when you look at the practicality of what we're talking about here and the technology and the software issues, and then couple that with the intent and purpose of all of the Electric Choice Act, I think that the Commission would have good standing to implement a longer transition.
Okay, Commissioner Barbe.
So let me just thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me be direct about this. Mr. Green, the utilities have made the assertion that payment posting will reduce the probability of disconnections, and I would presume you disagree with them on that. And if that's the case, I'd like for you to respond.
I think that's speculative. And I think one of the reasons I say that is because going forward, at least for new or renewed customers, they're going to be subject to the price caps. So the prices we won't have, to the extent that there was alleged to be problems because there were prices that were 15, 25, 35 cents per kilowatt hour, and the supplier could just get paid non-recourse, and the utility was on the hook. That's not going to happen as we transition into SB1. So that the ability of the customers to make the payments, especially for supplier prices, should be, I don't want to say easier, but should be, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but should be better, right? So, because they're going to be paying something that's either below the 12-month trailing average, right? In fact, they could end up paying less if there's a supplier that's able to make that offer. But and then but to me that's the primary reason, and those are facts that never existed. Certainly not 3 years ago in RM70 when the Commission adopted a pro rata over the distribution first payment posting system. I'd also point out that since SCB since that rulemaking, the General Assembly passed a statute a few years ago where suppliers are no longer offered to make offers to energy assistance households, which are the most vulnerable in Maryland. So when you take that subset of customers off the table, and then you put the price caps in, I shouldn't say they're no longer offered. They can make offers if they have a commission-approved offer. But to date, there are none. When you take that subset of customers off the table, when you look at the pricing ramifications of SB1, I think that makes the allegation of pro rata will lead to more service terminations. I think it makes it even more speculative.
Thank you. Mr. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Green, I just wanted to kind of follow up with you on questions I asked Mr. Hoppick about just the, the various parts of SB1 and to just see if you know whether or not the retail suppliers will be in a position to offer SB1 compliant products on January 1st. Because I am hearing that, you may not be ready for 12 months or more for dual billing, but I just wanted to find out how much of an issue that will be during the first year of SB1.
Right. So let's put the billing issue aside
Yes.
for a moment, because obviously that's the threshold issue, right? If we can't send them a bill, then it doesn't matter what the offers are or what we can offer. So, as I think Mr. Hoppick said it, that it was either just yesterday or the day before was the first look at the 12-month trailing average. I think my clients are going to have to process that and run it through their business people and marketing people and pricing people and so forth. And we're talking about offers that don't become effective until January 1st, so that's still 3 months away. I don't believe that suppliers prepare their offers, their pricing that far in advance of when they go to market, because they typically like the offer to be closer to what the market is at the time. And then so you've got the green side, which is the 12-month, and then you've got, the non-green side, and then you've got the green side where we have a rulemaking coming up, and the commission's going to have, I would assume after the rulemaking, the commission will have further proceedings with respect to green products, and a supplier would have to come in and get approval and so forth. So I think the verdict is still out on that. But again, the threshold issue all comes back to, can we bill a customer starting January 1st?
Okay. Yeah, I guess there's an urgency question too, whether or not we have the time to come up with, whether it's a different UCB or a dual billing system. But again, if there are companies that are ready to go on January 1st, then I think that is something that would inform our decision. But that's why I just asked the question.
I know that I have clients that are, have been looking very hard at the bill and talking with their business people, but the information is coming in from all the different proceedings and from the utilities, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now until the commission, really lays down how this is going to work and what the pricing components are going to look like and so forth. That's when suppliers, most of them will be able to, or maybe not all of them, will be able to make their decisions as to what they can do going forward.
Okay, and we're just talking a couple months away here.
Yeah, that's right.
The other is just on dual billing. We're talking a lot about it, and customers don't like it. And you've heard me say this before. I have participated in dual billing when I had solar panels on my house. The way it was set up is I paid the company for the electricity that came out, and that came in a separate bill. And I also now have a community solar contract, which I'm dual billed for. So both were very seamless, very automatic. So I guess I just wanted to press just a little bit on this issue of can dual billing work or not. And, are there elements, we've been talking about supplier consolidated billing, and one of the pros, one of the things that suppliers liked is the direct relationship with the customer, the ability to offer products directly. Is the position of retailers, hard and fast that dual billing cannot work, or, are there models already now that are working for commodity dual billing that may open the door for a different way of looking at this?
I'm not aware of any program in place anywhere where dual billing for residential customers happens with great frequency.
For retail. It does work for community solar. It did work for my relationship with the solar panel company that put panels on my roof.
Although I thought there was legislation a few years ago where at least part of your solar charges went on the utility bill, but perhaps there's still a second bill. But in any
Yeah, I'm just,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't have that contract anymore. So I'm just saying it was something that worked. Maybe it's not preferred by all, but it does work. So anyway, I just wanted to explore that just a little bit to see if if there is hard and fast resistance to the idea of going dual billing. So
Yeah,
and I'm
and-
hearing. Don't want to talk about this right now. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Suchman. Actually,
I think you're muted.
I think you're on mute, so.
I am on mute. I'm,
Okay,
I'm just
now
talking
we got
to
you,
myself.
so.
Good afternoon, Mr. Green. Just to be clear, your proposal would keep both existing and new contracts in place for POR until the utilities have been able to come up with a new software system. So POR would continue for, and it could be more, as Commissioner Barve noted, it could be more than 18 months. It could be 2 years or maybe even 3 years if there are sort of glitches. And so we have this mandate to get rid of PORs, but PORs will continue for both existing and new contracts until a new software system is put into place. Is that, I just want to make sure that I understand what your proposal is.
That is our proposal, yes.
Okay. But you're not proposing it because you want to keep PORs in place. Your proposal is because there's the new software system has to come in. You want to keep UCBs in place. So you wouldn't have a problem if we could find a path forward with the existing computer systems to allow for something in the interim that would eliminate PORs for new contracts, but still keep the UCB in place. Is that correct?
I think that's correct, but it depends on the date certain that the commission selects. I mean, our position, like it was back in August and has been, is that we support the continuation of purchase of receivables for existing customers under it's either Section 7 or 8, I believe, of SB 1. And we had that discussion in August, and I understand that does not seem to be where the commission wants to go. But if it's far enough, if the date certain is far enough out so that our suppliers can prepare for that and plan for that, then we would like to see we would have a greater priority on just having a UCB experience, a seamless UCB experience.
You're talking about a date certain for new contracts or a date certain for existing contracts?
I was talking about existing.
Okay. And my focus is sort of more on the new contracts, because the concern I have is if we continue PORs for new contracts, then we're not in compliance with the statute. So then we'd have to go to the legislature and say, well, I'm sorry, but there's a software glitch that is preventing us from putting in place this legislative mandate for new contracts. So that's, but if we can find a path forward for the new contracts, you don't have an issue with removing POR. You're just concerned about the issue around dual billing.
Correct. For new contracts and renewed contracts, all after 1/1/25.
Okay.
We just want UCB.
Right. So if we were to find sort of this path forward, because the utility is not purchasing receivables, you would then be responsible for pursuing failure to pay the bill. Correct? Because that you're not doing that now. The receivables stay with the utility, and it's the utility's responsibility to engage in collections.
That is correct. The collection risk would shift to the supplier.
Okay, and are your clients in place to be able to take on that responsibility?
To assume the collection risk on a post POR UCB experience. Is that the
Yeah,
question?
I mean, let's
Yes.
say let's say we find a path forward for new contracts January 1, 2025. Your clients will be able to assume the collection risk on January 1st.
Yes, there may be some. Yes, there will be some. It will likely. I can only speak generally on this. So we're talking about new customers after 1/1/25, right? So
Right.
Most, I'm not sure, suppliers will have additional questions for their potential customers. There may be credit screens involved. There may be deposits involved. But they would not take on a new customer, I would hope, without the understanding that they can assume that collection risk. I would assume, under the paradigm that we've been talking about, the utility would carry the supplier charges on the UCB for, I think it's 90 days or 3 billing cycles, something like that. And then unpaid charges would be kicked back to the supplier, and the supplier would have to collect those. And so
Okay.
that's where we support that time frame.
Okay, and so my question was only in terms, we're just trying to nail down all the different pieces. So this you would not need additional time for implementing this aspect of your client's new responsibilities.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that's all I have.
So, a couple questions. One, I thought you said earlier in your remarks that there's currently some retail customers that are being dual billed that you're aware of?
Mr. Hoppick said that. I was
Oh.
responding to him.
Okay. And in the future, when the collection risk is on the retail suppliers, since they don't have the ability to terminate service, they'd have to engage in just normal collection practices that other companies do?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let me invite Office of People's Counsel, and we actually got a chair right here at the end, so.
For the record, everyone around me was really nice to me.
Well, someone needed to
We're all
come and
old,
get, yeah,
too.
All right, well, hopefully they'll be nice to people at this end of the table as well. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. We filed comments on Monday along with the other parties regarding staff's report. I'd like to just start off by reminding us all that SB 1 is a consumer protection statute. It's a market reform statute, and we believe that it should be implemented in a way that maximizes consumer welfare. And with that in mind, we support the use of dual billing as an interim method for suppliers to bill their customers directly and for utilities to bill their customers directly for their respective charges. We support that for all residential customer contracts beginning on January 1st, 2025, including those that are currently in existence. We believe that that's an advantage because it would end POR on a date certain. We wouldn't have to worry about the utilities implementing two billing systems at the same time. And then we also believe that would put the utilities in a position that they could ensure that they are not violating SB 1's prohibition on purchasing supplier receivables to the extent that a retail supply contract has expired and the utility is unaware of it. And my understanding, and I believe what has been reflected in the utilities comments, both in writing and today at the table, is the utilities have no way of knowing when a supply contract expires. And then, along the lines of protecting consumer welfare, we also support the eventual development of a post-POR UCB system that utilizes a payment posting allocation method versus a pro rata allocation method. We believe that payment posting is in the public interest because it protects ratepayers from a service termination in a better way than pro rata would. We also believe that it reflects the notion that only utilities have the ability to terminate service for the non-payment of utility fees. We don't believe that the reforms in SB 1 should be construed in a way that requires special protections for suppliers having their charges appear on a utility consolidated bill that would not be available to suppliers that choose to dual bill, or even suppliers that choose to use the UCB mechanism, and not mind that the payment posting priority is in favor of utility charges. And then finally, I think that what the utilities have said in their comments is that, and I believe staff has touched on this as well, is that payment posting is an easier, faster, and cheaper way to implement a post-POR UCB system. So I'd like to just further respond to 2 points. One is I believe Mr. Hoppick made a point earlier that that in a future post-POR world, we might not need to worry about the relative percentage of partial payments that are being allocated towards supplier charges versus utility charges. And I think that his thinking is, well, since there will be a price cap, the amount of money that the customer owes is going to be more or less what the customer would owe to the utility for default service, SOS, or sales service. And I think that that's true to a certain extent, but I think it ignores the reality that every dollar of customer payment that is applied to a supply portion of the bill that cannot lead to a service termination is one less dollar that can be applied to the portion of the bill that could lead to a service termination. And, I think it's important to keep in mind that the utilities have an obligation to serve. And the money that they don't collect will be socialized amongst ratepayers. So to the extent that we have a payment posting priority that prioritizes utility payments over supplier payments, I think it's justified by the regulatory paradigm, and it should be implemented in a way that recognizes that the utilities have an obligation to serve, and that customers that participate in the supply market shouldn't create a situation where non-participating ratepayers are being forced to pay some of those uncollectible costs because of a payment posting priority that elevates supplier payments over utility charges. And then finally, on the notion that the pro rata mechanism is established by precedent, or is the direction that the Commission has decided to go in the past, I'd just like to remind everyone that when those discussions were being had, the retail supply market was viewed as a good thing, and that market forces would regulate it. SB1, I think, has disabused us of that notion, and I really think that it's important to start looking at the implementation of SB1 in a way that furthers the overall goal of the legislation to protect consumers. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Okay, Commissioner Schlesman. Go ahead.
Sorry, I have to deal with Hollis and stuff. And actually, I just wanted to wish a happy New Year to all of those who are celebrating starting this evening. But I missed. This is Mr. Auslander, correct?
That's correct.
I can't see you, and I missed much of what you were talking about, but I did read your filing. And I did want to speak to the payment posting issue, and I'm assuming the concern is, given SB1 was put in place because of concerns around customers being taken advantage of, to the extent we start to sort of get away from the POR model, which puts the responsibility on the utility, so the utility is in a position to avoid having to engage in disconnections. The last thing we want to do is to put in place an approach that would actually put the customer at greater risk for disconnection. That's your concern?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think you addressed most of my questions in your statement and your filed comments. But I did want to just ask the question about You've heard that we have issues with IT on both sides. Retail suppliers would not be able to be ready for dual billing before 12 to 18 months, and then you've heard the utilities aren't ready for any changes in their UCB. And then there are also just discussions about whether, the customer experience of a transition. So do you feel that the commission should be looking for a smooth transition as we move forward? Should we use, I guess I should ask, do we have the authority to, and should we use that authority to try to come up with a smooth transition again for the market participants and for customers? And if yes, what would you recommend?
So I would certainly agree with the idea that if it's possible to pursue a smooth transition, then that's what the commission should pursue. I do believe that SB1 has some pretty tight timelines, that require the commission to take action very quickly. So I think that there will always be some bumpiness to the transition from POR as it exists today to what POR, what the transition away from POR will look like over the next a few months or 18 months to 2 years, as suggested by some parties. I do think that from our perspective, it's important to have SB1 implemented as quickly as possible. We do, from our perspective, we do not understand why dual billing is so difficult for the suppliers to implement. We think that, we presume that there is significant financial incentive for them to develop a way to send their customers bills over the next 3 months. We at this point, don't understand why it's so difficult for a merchant to send their customer a bill for services rendered.
Okay, thank you. So yes, you would like to see something smooth, but bumps, any specific recommendations for us to smooth any of those bumps, or is it pretty much you've answered with your
I think to some extent, there, even if it takes place over an 18-month time period, I'm sure that some parties would perceive that as bumpy.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Barbe.
No questions, thank you.
So, in this future situation where the collection risk is on the retail suppliers, and given the fact that they don't have the ability to terminate service and are going to have to engage in normal commercial collection practices, is there a concern, and this is a hypothetical question, I'm not casting any aspersions on any of the retail suppliers, but if there were problems in the collection activities by the retail suppliers, do we have any authority to deal with that, or would the customer have to go to the Consumer Protection Division?
Well, I do think that the Commission's authority regarding the commercial activities of retail suppliers with consumers is pretty broad, and I think that you would have the ability to enforce the Commission's regulatory powers to the extent that a supplier does violate a Fair Debt Collection Practices Act requirement, for example. I would also think, though, that the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division would probably be viewed as the primary agency that would be enforcing those provisions. But as far as whether there would be a higher likelihood of those sorts of disputes happening, I suppose the answer is yes. Although I think that there's other ways that suppliers could attempt to protect themselves or limit the non-payment risk, including taking security deposits. I don't know exactly what the financial considerations are when you're trying to decide whether to take a customer to small claims court, which I imagine it would be in many cases, for the amount of money that they're seeking to collect. Certainly in a future world where the suppliers aren't being paid within 5 days of sending the bill to the utility, I'm sure there's going to be a higher likelihood that the suppliers will go after customers for unpaid bills.
Okay. This is actually a question for the group of you. Is the primary problem the timelines that we have to implement this, or is it more what we're trying to construct, or is it both?
I can start off, Your Honor. I think it's the former. It's the timeline. I mean, just having a implementation deadline of January the 1st, as we've said on numerous occasions, that really only leaves one alternative that we can implement by that date. As I believe Mr. Krieger said, almost anything is possible if you have enough time, money, and resources. And so, but I think the big challenge here is the first one, is time.
I agree completely.
Mr. Green.
From the supplier perspective, time is obviously an issue because of the dual billing issue, and but also the substance of, we think it's important that a customer get a utility consolidated bill. So, to the extent that puts me in both of your categories,
Sure.
then so be it. I'll have to live there.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
I guess the tagline "time, money, and resources" was mine, so I have to agree with it. But
that will be the one thing we all agree on today, and that will be the takeaway from today's hearing.
So certainly from a time perspective, the initial hurdle being January 1st is of primary importance, because that is written in the statute and certainly a compliance requirement for all of us. And I guess I would amend my earlier statement. Certainly the easiest path forward would be what Mr. Green indicated, which is to continue POR, but the law doesn't allow that.
Right.
So the easiest path, the second easiest path in our minds, is the dual billing solution, which is why we're
At time as well. We're happy to move. While we've expressed an opinion, we're happy to move forward under whatever construct you ultimately order, and we've tried to lay out the timelines that we'll need to implement each of those.
I agree that time is a concern, and I think one thing that's been reflected in many of the utility comments is that they need to know what they need to do as soon as possible, so that we could keep that period of time to as short a period as possible. So I do think that it's important to have some of these fundamental questions that have been presented to the commission decided as quickly as possible.
Mr. Hopick.
Yeah, thank you. So I would echo Mr. Oslander's comments. I think that the January 1 deadline is the primary challenge, and then the sooner large decisions are made, the quicker things will happen. I did have a couple thoughts on other things Mr. Oslander said, but I don't know if you'd like me to say those now or later.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so regarding applying assistance only to the distribution part of the bill, staff did recommend that for dual billing as a temporary measure, simply because the only thing the utility's billing for is its charges, and additionally, OHEP has a relationship with the utility. But longer term, if we're only applying assistance to utility charges, you would potentially create a mechanism or a system in which a retail choice customer gets help on approximately half their bill, and a SOS default gas service customer gets help on all of their bill. So I think there's an equity from the customer's perspective there. And then staff has argued vociferously for pro rata. I continue and don't want this to be interpreted as anything other than that, but there's also the question of how payment posting works. So staff did specifically propose a payment posting mechanism by age, both supplier and utility arrearages. If they're the same age, utility gets paid first. But I would like to emphasize, if we're in a world where we pay utility arrearages first and then utility current charges, any partial payment, the supplier is likely to never receive a payment. So they're going to wait 90 days. The entire bill is going to be sent back to them. And, in terms of creating a market within the constraints of SB1 that suppliers actually want to participate in, I think paying the utilities first for everything does not create that. Thank you.
Mr. Spiak.
I just wanted
then
to.
I'll turn to you. So.
Right. I just wanted to add, with respect to energy assistance, that there is the current issue on the electric side that a supplier can only make an offer that the commission has previously approved, and so far there are none of those. The situation where energy assistance is somehow applied to a supplier bill is probably unlikely to occur, and at least until that changes.
Mr. Arshad.
Yeah, that I just wanted. Thank you, Mr. Spivak. That was what I was going to say. And also, I don't believe that I think we addressed in our written comments that this issue of energy assistance, but I don't recall specifically speaking about it today. But I would agree generally that to the extent that we are moving into a future where a customer is receiving energy assistance and then is also taking offer under a commission-approved supply offer, that further discussion on how a customer could apply an EUSB grant, for example, towards that supplier portion, I think that that's a very important conversation to have, and we should try to figure out a way to allow that.
Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to send out a list of questions to try to answer some of these computer questions. Two things. One, we would want you to actually file the response. I mean, we're going to provide the questions publicly, and we'd like you to file the responses publicly. So if there's something secret about your computer system that you don't want everybody on the planet to know, you'll have to, I guess, file a confidential version and a public version, as you do in other situations. We'll try to get those questions out relatively quickly, and hopefully they will be precise given our computer knowledge, but bear with us. So, and I guess with that, we're adjourned for today. So.